Once a regular fixture on television, a former military spokesperson now closes the door on the media. Pete Hegseth doesn't lead with analysis or tactical insight. He controls the narrative by choosing who's excluded and who's allowed to speak, once a symbol of transparency and accountability. The Pentagon has shifted from a hub of public updates to a gatekeeper of political allegiance. Known from his time on Fox News, Hegseth moved from media figure to defense secretary. Now, his most consistent policy is silence, not defense planning. Since taking office, he's led just one press briefing. When challenged, he doesn't engage. He sidesteps and avoids.
Reporters for decades have operated inside the Pentagon, moving through the hallways, and of course they talk to sources. Hegseth is worried that it is unauthorized information. Reporters have no access to classified areas. Those are locked. I'm not aware of any instance in which a reporter has accessed classified information in the Pentagon by moving through the hallways and going into classified areas. Hegseth is embarrassed. He's embarrassed by certain events. He's embarrassed by this so much exposure to the information classified by all accounts that he posted on Signal.
The irony? Fox News, the very platform that once helped Hegseth climb to prominence, became the stage where his mask slipped. The one who unmasked him wasn't a rival provocateur, but veteran CNN correspondent Barbara Starr. No theatrics. No shouting match, just.com, surgical facts that landed like quiet explosions. Her revelations struck deep, exposing what Hegseth wished to bury. He avoids press briefings, not because of media chaos, but because he can't control the narrative and he fears Elon Musk might be privy to inner workings. Fox chose not to censor the segment. Maybe they saw it as harmless, but viewers, even on home turf, saw the truth. Hegseth wasn't taken down by slander, but by evidence. And if you think this was just a media spectacle, consider what's happening backstage. A journalist from American News Network aligned with Owen's pro-Trump platform had her Pentagon press pass revoked and was fired. Her offense meant not leaking secrets, but simply asking questions about press freedom. The same issue we've been highlighting all along.
To the plans we discuss, there's a reason why our nation's most closely held secrets are contained in certain places with only access from certain people. Nobody takes that more seriously than me. If there's one thing I've sort of been offended by, I don't get offended by much. I'm here to do my job for the president, for the country.
Even as Hegseth continues to pat himself on the back on live broadcasts, someone behind the scenes, someone who merely asked a non-controversial question, was quietly erased from the record. In today's climate, loyalty isn't just a performance. There's a ceremony to it now. Stay quiet, applaud at the right moments, and nod on QR. You're seen as a threat. The most disturbing part: no one protests. There are no headlines, no official investigations. This is the new model of authority. Silence the press, question nothing. Even neutral questions are now perceived as attacks. Freedom of the press isn't a guiding principle anymore, it's a polished disguise. But under this manufactured calm, a deeper fracture is forming. Pete Hegseth publicly spun a baseless defense after the court ruled against Trump's tariff measures, calling it legally irrelevant, rooted in fear rather than fact, and defying the standards of credible economic analysis. The ruling by the Court of International Trade dismantled Trump's legal strategy. His lawyers argued he was already facing harm in trade negotiations. Their justification, the claim of a credible threat, that was their doctrine. Not ethics, not fair bargaining, but intimidation cloaked as diplomacy. And this same model echoes inside the Pentagon. Disobey, and you disappear. Hegseth doesn't project strength. He functions as a component of a machine built to suppress dissent. A machine where fear replaces transparency. When journalists, the front line of democratic accountability, are silenced, what remains isn't discussion, it's enforced stillness. One would expect a former president to be focused on major crises, conflict in the Middle East, global instability. But Donald Trump, his attention was elsewhere. According to internal reports, during what should have been a solemn and symbolic military birthday celebration, his primary concern wasn't the war zones, it was the vibe. He reportedly lost his temper because the troops seemed too cheerful and the grandstands weren't filled to his liking. That moment shattered the illusion of leadership. It revealed a man more concerned with pageantry than purpose, more rattled by optics than by the chaos threatening the world outside.
Just explain what's happening here. Right, so we're going to take 6,000 soldiers away from their family, away from their training. These folks are people that deploy all the time. We're going to take tanks from Texas, put them on rail cars and ship them to Washington, D.C. We're going to line the streets of Washington, D.C. with metal plates so those tanks don't rip it up. Right, all for the cost of over $50 million. Right? That is wrong. It takes soldiers away from their families, away from their mission. It wastes taxpayer dollars. I just don't have time for parade.
A military parade costing over $50 million quickly ignited fierce media scrutiny and debate in Congress. Though publicly promoted as a tribute to armed forces and a showcase of national strength, the event revealed something entirely different. The atmosphere was lifeless rows of empty seats, soldiers appearing fatigued and disconnected. I've witnessed numerous military parades, from the Bush era to now, but none have felt as void of spirit as this one. It was more awkward than honorable. Tanks crawled through DC streets in eerie silence, while soldiers offered robotic salutes. It wasn't respect, it was performance. Not a logistical blunder, but the consequence of a vision obsessed with optics over meaning. Trump didn't request a solemn remembrance ceremony for military service. He demanded a grand display to elevate his own presence. Yet the low enthusiasm from the very service members intended to glorify him, and the reactions captured in footage exposed just how much slipped beyond his control. According to Pentagon insiders, many objected to the parade being framed as a tribute to leadership, rather than a genuine national acknowledgement. They didn't protest the event itself, but the meaning assigned to it. Pete Hegseth embodies the machinery behind the pageantry, a structure trained to stay silent, avoid conflict, and obey without questioning. Internal financial documents confirm that costs tied to this parade far exceeded what the Office of Management and Budget had authorized, but the larger concern lies in how that budget overrun was approved, quietly, swiftly, without checks, and the official who signed off on the majority of these expenditures, none other than Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth himself.
Additionally, you're blowing money on poorly conceived operations and vanity projects for President Trump. Retrofitting the Qatari jet to serve as Air Force One will cost about $400 million. The parade in D.C. this weekend will cost upwards of $40 million. Your bombing campaign in Yemen cost about $1 billion, and a week later they were having missile strikes in Israel. Your operations in L.A. will cost tens of millions of dollars, and you claim to be cutting costs at the Pentagon, but all I see are wasted dollars better spent addressing our most pressing threats like China. So, Mr. Secretary, what priorities have you cut funding for to pay for these projects?
A devoted Trump loyalist has just been dismissed not due to misconduct, but for showing too much allegiance. At the center of the controversy stands Pete Hegseth, the newly appointed Secretary of Defense, whose leadership is raising serious red flags inside one of America's most critical institutions. This story isn't just about Hegseth, it's about what his role now symbolizes. A shift from strategy to spectacle, from security to loyalty tests. Multiple internal sources confirm that, under Hegseth's guidance, the Pentagon has redirected hundreds of millions toward politically flashy but strategically questionable projects. $40 million was spent on a military parade. Over $400 million went to upgrading private aircraft for high-ranking officials. Additional sums funded media-ready troop deployments, designed more for visual impact than defense readiness. At the same time, vital national security investments were slashed. Cybersecurity upgrades, space surveillance programs, and modern radar systems, essential components of 21st century defense, were deprioritized, rather than acting like a strategic leader. Hegseth has adopted the role of political brand manager. In briefings, he is described as disengaged from operational planning and focused almost entirely on reinforcing Trump's public messaging. Defense insiders report that policy decisions under Hegseth prioritize media optics above real-world preparedness. Proposals that photographed well were fast-tracked. Proposals with substance but no showbiz appeal were shelved, and the consequences are mounting. Several senior military officials have quietly resigned, citing an unwillingness to serve in a department more concerned with headlines than homeland security. Meanwhile, as defense capabilities stall, the economy suffers another blow. Trump's signature tax reforms, touted as relief for all, delivered massive breaks to the wealthy, while ballooning the national deficit. Reports from nonpartisan analysts, including the CBO and Penn Wharton, have shown the gap widening. Billions were spent on hollow visuals, while foundational military infrastructure and national finances eroded in the background. Now, as internal backlash grows and Hegseth's inner circle weakens, the mask is beginning to slip. This isn't about defending the country anymore, it's about defending an image, and that's not just dangerous, that's unsustainable. Because when a defense secretary becomes more of a stage manager than a strategist, the threats don't pause for pageantry, they get closer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I want to ask about the Republican big, beautiful bill, which will knock about 16 million people off their health care coverage and cut programs that keep groceries cheaper for millions of families in order to try to pay for about $4 trillion in tax giveaways that are mostly going to be sucked up by millionaires, billionaires, and wealthy corporations. So, Mr. Besson, Secretary Besson, I'd like to start with a very simple question. Will this bill increase or decrease the deficit?
Senator Elizabeth Warren didn't just challenge Treasury Secretary Scott Bett over the flashy new tax legislation, she dismantled its very foundation. What looked like routine questioning quickly became a moment of rare bipartisan alarm. Analysts from across the ideological divide, including respected institutions like the Wall Street Journal and the Tax Policy Center, are sounding the alarm. This bill isn't merely flawed, it's unsustainable, and dangerously so. What gave Warren's remarks such weight wasn't just her data whiz. What followed: total silence. When she pressed Bet to name a single independent agency supporting his fiscal claims, he had nothing. No Congressional Budget Office analysis, no Penn Wharton projection, no breakdown from Moody's, just hollow assurances dressed up as economic policy. That's not leadership. That's political theater. Dive into the actual legislation, and its implications become even more troubling. While headlines boast sweeping tax relief and economic revitalization, the fine print reveals a different agenda. Key safety net programs face deep cuts. Medicaid's funding becomes unstable, tied to changing state formulas. SNAP benefits for food security are rolled back. Reimbursements for rural hospitals serving low-income regions are slashed. These aren't cosmetic changes. These are structural redesigns that hit working-class families the hardest while delivering enormous benefits to the wealthiest elite. The largest cuts go to pass-through entities, a category that includes family-run shops but also massive private equity firms and wealth shelters, representing less than 5% of Americans. That 5% controls over half of the country's wealth. This isn't supply-side economics. This is upward consolidation, resources being redirected from those in need to those already thriving. The cruelest irony: many of those most affected won't realize it until they're already hurting. Financial literacy gaps leave working families vulnerable. One father from Iowa summed it up: "I thought I'd get a tax break, but ended up owing more." His child tax credit was gutted, wiping out any gains promised under the new law. This quiet re-engineering of support systems is accelerating, and it's being camouflaged by buzzwords. Tax relief is spun as economic recovery. Regulatory rollbacks are framed as freedom. Entitlement cuts are sold as sustainability. But the truth is simple. When laws serve a wealthy few while stripping stability from the many, democracy suffers. Warren's questioning didn't just expose a faulty bill, it pulled the curtain back on a system where policy is crafted not by economists or citizens, but by lobbyists and insiders cloaked in patriotic language. When defense budgets favor parades over cybersecurity, and tax laws uplift billionaires while sidelining families, the problem isn't just misguided leadership, it's a conscious redirection of national values. Unless there's accountability in Congress, in journalism, and at the ballot box, this isn't just a fiscal issue anymore. It's a test of what kind of country we're choosing to become.